Clerk will call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Andy H. Wynn, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. I'd have hit that thing earlier if I'd have known that's who you were talking to. Our invitation this morning will be delivered by Pastor Lewis Hurd from the Grace Baptist Church here in Fort Worth. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges. Thank you, sir. Come on down.
Thank you, Judge, for allowing me to have this opportunity to come and pray with you guys. I don't take prayer lightly. It's very important for us, especially in this day and time, as we see so much of our nation and suffering and strife and so much going on, and sometimes you just feel a little bit helpless. But that's why we turn to Him, and we're going to turn to Him right now. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Oh, Father in heaven, we come to you knowing that you are the great and true and only God. We know that you are good to us in spite of some of the things that we see with our eyes here in our land. Lord, our hearts have been broken over the last several weeks, even close to home, as we know what has taken place in Dallas, but also in Louisiana and across the globe. We see things happening in Turkey and France and all over the world, and our hearts are broken, Lord. But yet, in the state of our helplessness, we turn to you because we know that you hear our prayers. And so we come to you now begging for forgiveness, first of all, for the things that we have done, the things that we have done in our lives that are against your will. And so we come to you, Lord, asking for that forgiveness. We know you've blessed us, and we thank you for that. And right now, Lord, I call and I ask for spiritual leadership in our land. Father, not just any leadership, but spiritual leadership that will draw us back to you. And so, Father, we're praying, we're begging, we're asking for those people to rise up and show your goodness through these individuals. Father, we need you. And we pray that you'd cast the evil out away from us. God, that you would heal our land. That as we break for you, Lord, that we know that there would be good things still to come. We're not giving up on this nation. We're not giving up on you. We know you're here, and we know you're watching us. So, Father, we turn to you now because we need you. For it's in your blessed and holy name we pray, in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Mr. Manius, agenda announcements.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have several announcements for you this morning. The first one is under the Administrator section, item 9A3. This is referencing Court Order 122222. We're going to hold that until after closed today. Also, members of the Court, if we can go to purchasing, item 9I1. This is bid 2016-181. It's the sale of recycled paper. There is a revised court communication in your folder this morning as relates to that particular item. Also, members of the Court, if you'll note, we do have a work session today. That will be after close. It should start about noon, and it will be held in 504C. And then finally, members of the Court, we do not have a Commissioners Court meeting next week. Our next meeting will be the first week of August. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of July the 12th.
Move approval. Second.
A motion is second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Brooks, I believe you have a proclamation today.
I do. It is in recognition of World Breastfeeding Week. Your Honor, if you'd please read that into the record.
Whereas mother's milk is the most easily utilized and cost-effective prevention strategy for many diseases such as various infections, allergies, asthma, sudden infant death syndrome, diabetes, obesity, and cancer. And whereas the cost analysis concludes that the United States could save over $13 billion in healthcare costs and prevent over 900 infant deaths annually if 90% of the babies would breastfeed exclusively for 6 months. And whereas 75% of women in Texas initiate breastfeeding, but only 11% are exclusively breastfeeding at 6 months. And whereas to mark the 2016 World Breastfeeding Week theme, Breastfeeding, a Key to Sustainable Development, the Tarrant County Breastfeeding Coalition will host the 5th Annual Family Expo and Big Latch On, a national synchronized event in support of moms and breastfeeding babies in multiple locations, including Tarrant County, on August the 6th, 2016. And whereas Tarrant County and the state of Texas are committed to increase public support, acceptance of breastfeeding as the infant feeding norm, remove barriers such as work outside the home, and mark the start of 17 Sustainable Development Goals in which the breastfeeding is a key element that show us how to value our well-being from the start of life, respect each other, and care for the world we share. Now therefore be it further resolved that we, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, do hereby proclaim August 1st through 7th, 2016 to be World Breastfeeding Week across Tarrant County. In witness whereof we have herein to set our hands and cause the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 19th day of July, 2016.
Thank you for reading that into the record, Your Honor. I'd like to state for the record that Tarrant County is a lactation-friendly employer in that we provide lactation suites in many of our county buildings. I move approval of the proclamation.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
We've got a delegation of people this morning to receive this proclamation. They include Pat Aldridge, Executive Director of Nursing of JPS Health Network, and the Chair of the Tarrant County Breastfeeding Coalition. Lucretia Bush, member of the Tarrant County and Dallas Breastfeeding Coalitions. Simone Sumberlin, Director of Programs, Mother's Milk Bank of Texas. Lane Walker, Assistant Breastfeeding Coordinator for Tarrant County Public Health and Secretary of the Tarrant County Breastfeeding Coalition. Elaine Guardian, Breastfeeding Peer Counselor, Tarrant County Public Health, and member of the coalition. Catherine Chavez, Breastfeeding Peer Coordinator, Tarrant County Public Health, and member of the coalition. And Shelby Perdue, Certified Doula, mother of 9-month-old nursling, Nora, and a member of the Tarrant County Breastfeeding Coalition. Would you all meet me, please, at the podium?
Come on down.
Y'all gather around up here.
Do we want to maybe, let me move that podium, that way we get them all?
Okey-dokey.
You want to make comment first?
Want to picture first or comments first?
Uh,
Picture first.
Please gather around and listen. Hello, Fred. Miss Nora. Elijah? Come. Good girl. Everybody get in, scrunch up real little. Those in the back, find a space to look through.
Camera back there.
We'll get that podium there. That one. Let him come out first. Don't want to come out first?
Don't pin them in there, GK.
We'll bring those up to you, okay?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, County Commissioners. Thank you so much on behalf of the Tarrant County Breastfeeding Coalition for this proclamation. We really appreciate the support of our breastfeeding mothers in Tarrant County. I also want to recognize that Tarrant County is the first county government in Texas that is a mother-friendly workplace. It sets an example. It sets an example for the community, for the workplaces that we work in, to go back and actually increase the numbers of facilities that are mother-friendly facilities. And this allows our moms to come back to work who want to continue to provide breast milk for their babies and still be able to be a useful part of the workforce. It encourages health, and we get much healthier, happier babies, as the 4 little ones can attest that are here. They're all breastfed. So again, thank you so much for the support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we will proudly display this. Thank you very much. We really
Thank you all.
appreciate it.
Thank you, lady.
Next, Commissioner Fickus.
Yes. Could I first start by asking all the members of the Tarrant County Historical Commission to stand? Okay. I'm going to read a little bit here, and then I'm going to have y'all come up to the podium in a few moments. But every year, the Texas Historical Commission uses the Distinguished Service Award to recognize a county historical commission that documents a well-rounded program of history and preservation, related projects that fulfill the Distinguished Service Award criteria established by the Texas Historical Commission in 2010. Congratulations to the Tarrant County Historical Commission, all volunteer body, for accomplishments in historical and cultural preservation during 2015. And I want to recognize the chairman that year, Joe Priddle. Joe, there you are. Thank you, Joe. County historical commissions in Texas provided more than 480,000 volunteer hours in 2015, which the Texas Historical Commission called an in-kind donation to the state valued at $11.3 million. This donation, according to an agency news release, helps preserve Texas heritage for the education, enjoyment, and economic benefit of present and future generations. I want you, if you did not see them when you came in, please look at them when you leave, but they have put up a number of displays throughout the hallway, out front, and then along the side back over here. So if you get a chance, please look at those. They're very, very informative. And I believe some of that came from a grant. Is that correct, Steve? Okay. And I know who's going to be speaking? Steve, would you be speaking? And why doesn't everybody come up? And GK, could you also move the podium?
Yes, sir.
Judge. I'm gonna pull a consent agenda out.
How you do?
I have fair middle.
Fair middle? You know, that's two different rates.
I know. That's how I look at it.
I'll learn that. They never use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Steve, we're gonna take a picture, and then I know you might want to have some things to say. Come on, get in here.
Oh, wait a minute, why aren't y'all get on up in here?
Whoever you, Steve. We can look over your shoulder.
Looks like they're firing squad.
One more, come on, get some more. Could you bring that back, DK, and let everybody else go have a seat, and then Steve will have a few comments. I appreciate you being here. Art, good seeing you. So nice to see you. Thanks a lot. Appreciate your leadership.
There's two of them. All right, so let's see if we can get this back in here for you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor and Commissioners. As Chairman of the Tarrant County Historic Commission this year, I want to thank you for all your support that you've given the commission over the years and all the programs that you've made available to the commissioners on the history of Tarrant County. Governor Abbott appointed John Now as Chairman of the Texas Historic Commission, and John Now appointed Doug Harnan as head of the chairman for the World War I anniversary in 2017. And I have taken the role of the director for the Chisholm Trail 150th anniversary in the state of Texas for 2017. Doug and I have been working with the Texas Historic Commission, and they want to do an app on World War I, an app on the Chisholm Trail, and they're going to reproduce this brochure for 2017 Centennial. And one of the projects that Doug's been working on is the history of Tarrant County, which he'll talk about now.
I believe each of you have the full booklet. This booklet has each of the panels that are part of this exhibit of 45 panels on early Tarrant County history. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on this. The idea for this came out of one of our summit meetings, actually now a couple of years ago. But the idea was to really explain the kind of the early development and history of Tarrant County. I think because a lot of people really just don't understand it and don't have that knowledge and background. So, but very fortunately, we put together a proposal, which then we submitted to the FASH Foundation, and they in fact gave the county really a $5,000 grant to have the panels, which we then had to design to be created. And I'm very proud that Linda Fash Bush, head of the foundation, and Bill Podsinik, and I'll never get that name right, if they would stand, they, from the Fash Foundation, recognize them for their support, and they have made this possible. So I just wanted all of us to thank them and give them a they and the foundation are a wonderful example of a local foundation very interested and committed to our history and heritage. What I'd like to do is give a little quick background on this, because this is a product and a project of the commission, and I think hopefully everyone will be very, very proud of that. But there were three people that myself and the Holmes, Clara and Bob Holmes, if they would stand, we were sort of the inter sanctum committee that put this together, and really appreciate all that they did. But it was a project and activity of the entire commission, and fortunately the commission members know how to spell very well. And because of my problem of inputting, there were a lot of misspelled words. So as you think about appointing new commissioners, new to the county commission, make sure they know how to spell, because that's really very important. So anyway, I think that if there are any misspelled words still in this, please blame me. But the exhibit, kind of the whole idea of the exhibit was to go back to the basics, which is when were counties created? Why was Tarrant County named Tarrant County? What were the major forces that in fact created the county? And, the geographic and geological kinds of things important, the Native Americans, the contributions of various groups, people, the African American community, a lot of the other immigrants that came in. And so this is shown in these panels. In fact, I think Betty Porter has one of the ones that Bob, Claire, and I developed, but these are a few of the ones you have here, but they're all, I think, 20 by 26 inches. And very proudly, the entire exhibit is now shown at the Haltom City Library, and Betty was very instrumental in getting it there, and I think hung them very well. So anyway, it's quite an achievement. They will be there on exhibit through, in fact, August. And at the end of August, then, this exhibit will be available for other locations. And the memo, I think you have this memo in the material, which gives kind of all of the more detailed background. But I believe we will be offering this exhibit at no cost to any of the other locations within Tarrant County. So that is kind of basically it. But I think that it was interesting that the librarian in Haltom City made some interesting comments about people looking at this. And this, this just scratches the surface. But I think that's the purpose, to get people interested in learning more about their county heritage and history. So with that, I just want to thank the commissioners, because they all were involved in this, and I think this is a project that hopefully we can all be very proud of, and hopefully it will lead to other things that will help educate and engage people in terms of county history. So if you have any questions, we'd be glad to make up some answers. But anyway, thank you for your support, and we really appreciate it, and thank the FASH Foundation for their contribution to making this a reality. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Would you like to make a motion to receive and file?
Yes, I'll make the motion to receive and file.
Second.
A motion is second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Pickens, I think you had another announcement that you wanted to make.
I do. Next Friday, on the 29th of July, we will be having what we call Precinct 3 Summer Fun, United Way, Life Gift, beach party at our sub-courthouse. And for those who just are really waiting to do something exciting, we're going to have Hawaii shirt contest. Okay? Everybody's got one. And you only wear them in Hawaii, because that's the only place they look good. But if you'll bring your shirt, put it on, we're going to have a contest, and judging will be done sometime around 12 o'clock. But it's going to be on the 29th from 10:30 to 2. And in our little community room, it's always 68 degrees. We'll have hamburgers and hot dogs and frozen cherry limeades, and again, the Hawaiian shirt contest. We'll have a live steel drum music, games and prizes, silent auction, door prizes. So cruise on over for fun on the 29th. And JD, I know you got a Hawaii shirt.
I got a bunch of them.
Yeah,
But
I bet you do.
my question is, Phillips, how did we get the temperature down to 68 over in his building, and the rest of us are running about 73 or 74?
I got a key to the mechanical room. So, anyway, it's going to be a fun time benefiting United Way and Life Gift. So we'll hope to see you there. Thank you.
And then I'd also like to remind everybody, we've got the back-to-school roundup coming again. Deadline for registration is August the 3rd. There is the backtoschoolroundup.org is where you find all the information. This is a great project, and I know that in addition to this one that we help with, there are back-to-school programs, backpacks and things like that happening all over the county. Again, I think it just shows the generosity of the folks that we have here and the effort to really have, to hopefully have no child go to school that first day and not have the supplies and different things that that are requested for that beginning day. It gives them an excitement about going to school as opposed to sometimes an embarrassment about not having certain things. So that again, the registration has to be by August the 3rd. The event itself is August the 10th at Will Rogers. And they're expecting, we'll expect to register close to 25,000 children that will receive supplies. In addition to that, they really kind of take care of them from head to toe. They give them vision checks, dental checks, haircuts. They have a lot of different activities for the kids, as well as information for the parents about where to be able to get services and help from that standpoint. So it's a great event. This is the, I believe, 12th annual one of these. So again, that's occurring. And if you go to that backtoschoolroundup.org, you'll see where to register and a lot of the information about that. I think that's got that covered. So at this point, then, we will go on to the consent agenda. And Commissioner Johnson, I think you were...
I'd like to pull item 9L2, transportation, discuss that when we get to transportation.
Okay. 9.
L2.
Okay. Okay, so we'll pull item 9L2. Do I have a motion?
I move approval of the rest of the consent agenda.
Second.
A motion second to approve the consent agenda with that exception of 9L2.
9L2.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have two additional items for the Court's consideration this morning. The first, we're requesting that the Commissioners' Court approve a services agreement between Tarrant County and the Hospital District for prostate cancer screening and testing.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion?
Yes. I'd like to thank the hospital district for stepping up and figuring out how to provide prostate cancer screening to our employee group at an affordable price. This is what the county and the hospital district should be doing together to raise the level of health for all of our citizens. We serve the same people, so we should collaborate, and I want to thank them for that.
Any other discussion?
And let's hope that we can get out the proper information about the screening that they're going to do because a lot of questions came up out at my maintenance facility. Is it mandatory? No.
No.
Is it a prick of the finger or is it a blood draw? It is a blood draw.
It's a blood draw.
But we need to get the
But
facts
there's no
out.
magic finger.
Need to get the, I'm not going there, but we need to get the word out.
That's what they really want to know.
Ms. Glenn is going to be working on that.
Good.
Vote. Motion passes unanimously. Next item.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members, court item number 2, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve the submission of a grant application and resolution to the DPS for hazardous mitigation grant funds. This is provided by FEMA.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Snyder.
The Risk Management Board is recommending the payment of claim to Reginald Jones for the amount listed on your agenda or in your court
Move approval.
communication.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
I move to receive and file the personnel agenda. Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the personnel agenda. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Information technology. Chris.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are requesting this morning that the Commissioners Court approve payment of an invoice to DocuSign Incorporated for the annual subscription for the business professional edition of that software.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Ann. Good morning.
Good morning.
We have one item from Public Health for your approval that we're requesting, and that is an agreement, an MOU, to be signed with the Arlington Housing Authority. And this is a really great opportunity. Some of the ladies who are in the Nurse Family Partnership Program are homeless, and they've written a grant in Arlington to where they can sort of fast track these ladies that we refer straight from the Nurse Family Partnership Program.
Excellent. Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Mr. Beecham.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You know, it just seemed almost like football season a few minutes ago. Those small children in the back of the room were already whimpering about LSU getting beat. You all hadn't even played yet, but we have 4 items for reconsideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for bid 2016-181. Sale
He's from
recycle.
Arkansas. You just have to take that into account.
Well, you could do like Thor. Just throw this in.
I could probably hit him.
Yeah.
I'll hold him for you so you can.
Sale of recycled paper, recommendation be toward a per unit price basis according to the high bidder. Evergreen Fiber Sales, who are purchasing our sorted office paper at $161.25 per ton.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 2 is another bid award recommendation for RFP 2016-159. This is our annual contract for traffic control equipment. Recommendation be toward a per enterprise basis, awarding to the primary and secondary vendors meeting all specifications as shown in your court communique.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 3 is an item in regards to bid 2016-118. This was a bid for the Tarrant County Corrections Center Level 1 renovation. We are recommending rejection of all bids and asking for permission to rebid with revised specifications. One bidder actually came in $2 million over budget. Second bidder asked that their bid be withdrawn.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Now, last item is item in regards to bid 2016-143. This annual contract for lawn maintenance. Again, we are recommending rejection of all bids and seeking permission to rebid with revised specifications. There are some scheduling issues within the specifications which need to be addressed.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Items, let's see, this is going to be Bill, Mr. Riley.
Bill, I'd like for you to just explain to me, because I don't understand your proposal here. What are we doing?
It's a plat approval for a single plat, single family or single piece of property inside that subdivision. It went through the city of Fort Worth through their plating process.
It's not in the city of Fort Worth.
Well, it's in the ETJ.
Right.
Which they have, everything goes through the city of Fort Worth.
Okay.
And it went
Just
through
wanted to
their-
clarify that.
Yes, and then it's brought to us to approve it to the Commissioners Court.
So what are we actually approving?
It is probably, I can't remember the details of it, but it is probably in a subdivision that probably hasn't formally been platted as far as going through the county's process. There's a couple of subdivisions up in that area that have that issue, and and to get septic and so forth on there, it's got to be an approved plat according to the city of Fort Worth, and I think that's the process they're going through.
So it's a one-lot subdivision?
Correct. Well, it's a one lot within this subdivision. Yes.
And so each time somebody decides they want to build something on there, they have to go through this platting process in order for Fort Worth to allow them to build in their ETJ area.
If it's been determined by the city of Fort Worth that that plat was probably not recorded through the process of the county, I don't know that from what I've gotten from the city of Fort Worth, that is the case, and I think that it's what we've kind of looked at too, and saw that it never went through a formal process of being platted through the Commissioners Court. It may have been filed, but
So the developer didn't plat each one of the different lots, they're just kind of, here's a lot.
Correct.
And every time they sell a house, or every time they decide to build a house, they've got to define what the lot is for that particular house.
Yes, and that's a lot to do with the septic system, because it's got to be, according to our standard, it's got to be platted through the Commissioners Court to allow them to put a septic system on that piece of property.
So is the house already built?
And it probably is. In some cases, they've kind of gotten caught last minute without that being done through the city for, when they come to see us about a septic system, a lot of times it is at that last point. There's been a couple of them in that area.
Doesn't public health have to pretty well tell them where they can put that septic system?
Correct. And that's one of the requirements, is it's got to be platted, and we go to the city of Fort Worth, and they said this piece of property has not been platted. It's a single property.
It was sold by Meets and Bounds primarily?
I would assume yes. As far as the.
And they do a survey, they just don't file a plat.
Probably, yeah.
Goes through a title company.
It goes through the
a
formal
legal
platting
is the-
process
yeah.
of that individual piece of property, yes.
Okay.
Again, it's gone through the city of Fort Worth process to come to us before we can plat it.
Well, we would have had to have platted it anyway for the septic system.
Correct. Well, it has to have an approved plat for that piece of property, and it evidently did not have.
An approved plat by us.
Correct.
So how?
I mean, as far as probably the whole subdivision, there was not.
Do we not have inspectors that should have said, wait a minute, we're building something and they're gonna have to put a septic tank there and you hadn't come talk to us?
Well, that's through they know that they've got to get an approved septic, approval to get a septic system. And when they started going through the process, they didn't have an approved plat.
But the house has been built several years, hasn't it?
I'm not sure on this one. I know that there's been an issue on a couple of houses along this line as far as the septic system. And they were under the assumption that they could go ahead and put in a septic system, but when it went through the county, we checked on it and through the city of Fort Worth.
Sounds like somebody built a house out there and didn't bother to check with anybody.
I've lived in that subdivision for 15 to 16 years, and this is the first I've ever heard of this. There is a problem with a septic arrangement on one house back in the far back side of this subdivision, but I've never heard that we're not platted out there.
Well, okay, I may be confusing, because I thought, I heard him say that most everybody is, but apparently somebody built a home, decided they weren't gonna go through the platting process because they lived in the county and they figured they didn't have to. And some way or another, if it's been 2 or 3 years, all of a sudden something happened that somebody came back and said, okay, you need to plat.
The city of Fort Worth told them they needed a plat.
Okay.
Who did?
The city of Fort Worth, because it's gone through their process. I mean, we usually get these through the city of Fort Worth, yes.
So it sounds like there's a gap within the cities of Fort Worth process.
I don't know that what it amounts to is when you get out into the unincorporated area, somebody decided to build a home out there and figured they didn't need to talk to anybody. And
And
apparently
we have
they did
instances-
it for about 2 or 3 years before somebody woke up to the fact that there was something out there that hadn't been approved by anybody. Is
I
that
don't know
let me
anything
check on
about
it.
going to the city of Fort Worth and getting your property platted.
Looking at this,
I built out there and I haven't been to Fort Worth on anything.
look, there's an aerial here, you
Might not want to say
included.
that.
As a matter of fact,
Bill, could this have been a larger piece of property? Somebody decides they want to build a home and they create another lot. That's
I
what
don't,
this-
I don't
that's what
remember this
picture
being the
looks like.
case in this one. I can go back and check on it.
It looks like
We
they're
wanna do-
creating a lot out of it's a large lot, and they're taking 2/3 of it,
Yeah, I think that's what they're.
creating another lot and building a home on it, and it's not platted.
Okay.
The bigger lot may be platted, but this
That may be
isn't.
the case in this one, yes.
well, there's a lot of maybes here. I would like to have some facts.
Okay, I'll bring it back.
Let us, yeah, we'll
I'll
hold
bring
this
it
matter
back.
back.
I'll bring it back next week, that's fine. Or the week after, yes.
No action.
No action.
They've already got their septic system, so.
Yeah, this is kind of like asking for.
It's not urgent.
It's kind of like asking for forgiveness versus permission.
There you go.
Several times that's the case, but I'll get back with you on that. I'll bring it back.
But put it back on the agenda for our next meeting, but take it off of consent so we can discuss it.
Okay, will do. Anything else? Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
I have an interlocal agreement with the City of Fort Worth for item 9M1A and B. Has that been approved by the DA's office? Move
Second.
approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Are there any appointments today? There being none, you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius?
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have one item I'd like to bring to you this morning. This concerns the compensation system survey updates. Mr. Glogowski from Hay Associates is here to address the court.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. You know, this is probably my 18th year coming up here. And as I've reflected on all the people that came before me on the agenda, I would have to say this has been one of the more interesting conversations throughout the day of the different topics that were covered. today. I'll let you guys just take that in for whatever you want to take it. So a presentation, a briefing, I'll try to keep it brief. Well, if you think about it, we
Go
talked.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to tell you all the things.
Second, we'll take care of the phone.
Wow, we talked about a lot of interesting things. So a briefing about the study this year. We have a multiple page discussion guide here that I'd like to skip to page 7 in the effort of time and simplicity. So just as a reminder, we've done this study every year for, just about every year for the past 15 plus years. You have what we refer to as policy groups. IT is a policy group. Law enforcement is a policy group. Exempt is a policy group. And this slide is meant to give the court a very high level picture or set of words around where is Tarrant County paying relative to the market on each of these different policy groups, and how did that improve or not improve from last year's study. So this says that in general, most of your policy groups are paying at this infamous P25, which is a place that the court historically has wanted to target its pay for its employees. So high level, you generally are paying your employees at your stated philosophy. And while we know the devil's in the details, the position of each one of these policy groups against the market isn't identical, but generally you're paying every group at the 25th percentile, with this year maybe the exception of the IT exempt group. We can talk about that if needed. There's certainly some reasons around what's going on there.
So again, to be sure we understand this, that when we're paying at the 25% level, that means that for that particular job, there's 75% are paying higher than what we're paying.
Yes, and keeping in mind that it is a blend of public and private sector employees, and much discussion years ago about that kind of position.
But that's a cash perspective. That's not including
Correct.
Other benefits.
Correct.
Okay.
We have we have occasionally studied the benefit side, but it's not been an every year kind of study. So that position was kind of thought of as an appropriate place to be many years ago. I believe, Judge Whitley, you were on Commissioner's Court and Commissioner Johnson was on court way back when that kind of...
We understand the way back when.
Okay, sorry. Well, I'm dating that about myself too, so. So in general, you weren't close to those positions years and years ago. I mean, there were many strides that were made over the years to get there and now stay there, if you will. And some of the actions by the court approving budgets for employees pretty periodically have allowed you to keep pace or actually gain ground, if you will, on your position. And this slide is hard to read from afar, I apologize, but what I wanted to do is underline this, here's each group, here's a kind of a high level who the market is by kind of demographic, a statement or two about that particular group as a whole relative to that couple market perspectives, the number of people and the payroll in each group. And consistently every group is above the 25th percentile. It may be ever so slightly, it may be a little bit more than ever so slightly, with the exception of the exempt IT group or IT exempt group. So that's just a high level, just picture and a set of words again that emphasize where you're positioned. Giving all of that and using the idea or concept of that place in the market that you want to pay at is basically where you're at, with some exceptions. What is it going to take to then either at least maintain that position in the marketplace? So we have made some structure recommendations, meaning we have gone in each policy group, IT, law enforcement, so forth, and we're making recommendations on how much the ranges, minimum, midpoint, max, should be adjusted upward to help follow the market in the future. And that does generate a cost. You do have people that fall below max hiring rate when those ranges are changed, and so there's a slight cost to that. In addition to that cost, we are recommending a 3% PFP budget for the employee base. This figure, we believe, will allow you to maintain, if we're standing here next year, where do you stand? That 3% should keep you very much in line unless something earth-shattering happens, plus or minus in the economy, should keep you at that same position in general. And the next several pages just illustrate our, kind of precision around what we're asking each one of those ranges or each one of those grades within each group to move by. So when we say you're paying everybody at the 25th percentile, that's a very broad generalization. We certainly know that on a job by job or grade by grade, it's not always the exact same position. So these range movement differences are meant to simply better align everybody with the 25th percentile as close as possible. So you'll note the different percentage change by group, and in some instances, the grade recommendation change, structure only, also changes. Please note that on page 10, oh, it looks like 13 up there. Why is it 10 on my page? That's kind of scary. We are making some recommendations to law enforcement of a 2% structure change. There's been several more detailed discussions that have taken place about the study and certain key areas that might need more examination. One of them was the law enforcement group. We had some discussions about IT. There's been discussions about craft. And I think Ange, unless there's specific questions to me, Ange has some additional material to cover about some of those more in-depth discussions that have taken place since we delivered the study to
We had talked about, I know, and I think you talked about it with other commissioners, but specifically with regards to the jailers and in comparison to Dallas County, that we were significantly behind and hoped that we were going to be able to catch them up. Has that specifically been addressed?
Yes, and that's what Ange is going to cover, because there's been multiple variations of what could happen and how you could do that, and I know that's been work done by Human Resource here and in some discussions with the Law Enforcement Association, but I know they've worked on that.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just to address the rest of this, there's a couple additional slides that you see here. This one talks about how we as a whole compare to the market, much of the same information that we've already talked about. And then that slide is a general cash versus market data. So for the entire county, how do we compare? Our usual guide, if you need to know hay points and how we do this and equivalent grades, that's what that is. And then the rest of these are cash, our position versus market data. So all of that information for each of the specific policy groups that Paul just mentioned. What I've just given to you are some additional recommendations. Paul mentioned information about a couple of different groups that we want to address differently. So in that first section on the handout under structure adjustments, I'll start with number 2, and this is specifically to your point, Judge Whitley, about the detention officers or jailers. We are, as you know, experiencing some pretty serious recruitment issues with that group right now. We have over 60 detention officer openings, and we continue to struggle to recruit. So we are looking for an alternate plan as opposed to what Hay has recommended for that group and for the law enforcement group. What we're essentially recommending for the jailers is an increase as well as a shift. So what we're looking at is taking today's step C, adding 4% to that, as well as all the other steps, and then shifting step C to be next year's step A. So instead of having the full step A through K system, we're recommending the step A through I system. Hopefully that will get our starting salary up high enough, we can start recruiting a little better. That does, at least for the current moment, get us above the Dallas County higher end rate, and hopefully we'll continue to have that benefit.
This addresses what was expressed to me by the court members of trying to do something for those people on the bottom.
Yeah.
And so that we can do some recruiting. We're just
Yeah.
unable to hire officers right now.
Well, and again, I think as you said, it'll get us up to about what Dallas County is doing right now, but that's what they're doing right now. Now, let me ask one question, and I'll ask this of the court. At this point in time, do you want to address these items so that as Debbie is looking at the budget, or do you want to wait until we get into the budget and then talk about them on an item-by-item basis?
Probably need to wait till we get into the budget, but this is gonna be the recommendation, I think, coming from the committee that we have.
Okay.
So we'll take 4% for the grade 51s, essentially shift that whole scale and do the step C to step A recommendation. We'll also, for the remaining grades 52 through 60, recommend a 3% adjustment for those structures. That will alleviate a little bit of the compression that would be caused if we left it at 4 and 2%.
Is pay the only factor that leads to the recruiting problem? Is there any other factor that we have determined?
Well, we've talked about a number of issues. We've talked about just the general state of law enforcement today and how when the economy improves, we have less people, less applicants into those basic entry-level jailer positions. And certainly with current events, it's difficult for people to determine that law enforcement is a career that they want to move into.
So we are hoping with this adjustment, we may be able to recruit some new detention officers.
Correct.
But that may not be the case.
It may not be.
Well, it's a start.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's something to get us started.
Exactly, and I just want to make sure that we understand that.
And we try to, this is the one area where we need to be comparable with at least the surrounding counties, and most specifically Dallas, because I think it's much easier, you know, when you.
A lot of hiring back and forth.
You can go back and forth and, you know, it's a drive, it's a little bit further of a drive, but for $250 a month, you can make a little bit further drive, or you can move, so. I think it's a little bit different. Collin County, Denton County, they're not looking for as many, and so, you know, I think our prime comparison needs to be with Dallas County on that one. This is Dallas County texting right now.
They just increased theirs, huh? Moving on to the craft group, we had a couple recommendations for that group in order to address some recruiting issues. Specifically, what we're looking at there is to introduce a higher-end rate of 20% for all of the equipment operator positions, 2 through 5, as well as the landscape worker positions. Number 4 addresses the new overtime regulations we've heard so much about in the news, and we continue to hear about possibilities of that changing. For the moment, our recommendation is that we increase the minimum for grade 70. This one would increase that minimum above the new minimum salary threshold of $47,476. We would plan to freeze that scale until compression between 70 and 71 is a little bit better than it would be in this scenario. We are actually recommending a 7.2% increase for that scale, so you can see how compression would be caused there. And then plan to address it when the compression issue is alleviated, or until we have to move it again in 3 years with the new threshold. 5 and 6 is nothing new. Those are minimum and maximum implementation. So once we move the scales, we'll adjust non-law enforcement employees to the new salary grade higher-end rates, unless our appointing authorities and department heads tell us otherwise. And maximum implementation means all of these steps, the law enforcement steps, will move and the employees will move with them. Under merit increases, we're recommending a 3% merit pool with a 0 to 6% merit increase range, same as last year. Most of the details here are the same. We'll look at lump sums again. If there's a merit increase, a structure adjustment of less than 3%, an employee may be eligible for a lump sum payment, the total of the merit and lump sum not to exceed 3%. Number 5 there addresses the IT issue that Paul mentioned earlier. We do know that our IT exempt structure in particular is below P25. What we're recommending there is a 2% market adjustment. That would be 2% to salary rather than to the structure. We're moving both structure and salary in this case, and that would be applied on October 1st. We're hoping that will address some of our recruitment issues as well as retaining some employees so we don't lose them and have to end up recruiting more. Step increases will be awarded as usual on their review dates. Project and unclassified employees looking at a 3%.
Let me ask you a question. I want to go back to number 2, because I don't know that I understood this. With 3%, with the 3% structure adjustments. So what you're saying is we're moving the whole structure up, as it were, for 3%. So if they're at that maximum, they're not going to get a lump sum because we gave them the 3%.
Correct.
Okay.
And they'd no longer be at the maximum.
Right.
Correct. As I said, project employees and unclassified employees are recommending 3% there. Those also are awarded automatically unless we're notified otherwise. Reclassifications that we've gone through that process for the most part, those will be awarded October 1st. General rules, most of that is the same as always. Performance appraisal scores need to be at 2.95 or above, and the rest is, as I said, the same as always. The second page that you see there are the structure recommendations that Paul and I just went through. So the only change you see is on that last column. For the exempt grade 70 and the law enforcement structures, we have our alternate recommendations there. And then finally on the last page are the projected costs for next fiscal year as well as fiscal year 18 to the general fund and the road and bridge funds. And with that, I'll take any questions you have.
Okay.
And these figures are not a surprise to the budget director because she sits in this committee.
Yeah.
I'm not saying she necessarily agrees completely,
There,
but
yes.
she sits on the committee.
Well, I think as long as she shows up on budget day with a tax rate decrease in her pocketbook, then we'll.
Yeah, these are recommendations, and we have to see how these numbers fit into the overall budget, right? That's before we can. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Ange.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, that's all we have at this time.
What this sheet sort of shows.
Yeah. Then I will we will recess our open meeting and proceed to close to discuss items exempt under section 551. Well, to move into our workshop.
Okay, Your Honor, before we go into the workshop, if we could go back to the administrator section of the agenda, and this is item 9.3, and we're requesting that the Commissioners Court rescind Order 122222 and authorize the filing of a suit on behalf of Tarrant County against Volkswagen, Volkswagen Group of America, and all the other issues that are on the agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All the other issues on the agenda.
As it relates to item 3.
Okay. There was a few other items on that agenda that I wasn't sure we were ready to take action on.
Well, thank you for catching me on that, Your Honor, and we'll be more clear next time.
I have no, I don't. Do I have a motion?
A motion and a second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Wait a minute.
Opposed.
I know. Motion now doesn't pass unanimously. It passes 4-1. Go.
Your Honor, if we could move now to the work session. We have 2 presentations for you today. This concerns the hospital district and its strategic efforts. Kirk Solomon is going to be the first to present for. We've allocated between 30 and 45 minutes for the presentation. If we can basically use the same format that we used before, which was we can ask questions as they make their presentation. I thought that worked really pretty well the last time. You also have a score sheet that we've put in front of you, and
I'm still looking for that. Thank you.
so if you will introduce your team and
Yes.
start.
Thank you very much. Judge Whitley, County Commissioners, Mr. Manius, appreciate your time this morning. Wanted to talk to you about our proposal to assist the hospital district and JPS Health in its long-term plan and analysis. 4 primary objectives today. 1, introduce you to our team. Also give you a little bit of background on our team as well as our firm. We'll walk through the process, answer any questions you may have around the process, around our proposal, but definitely want to leave time to address any questions you have as well. So starting off, introduce our team. We came last week for a brief meeting. For those of you that were in attendance of that, slightly different attendees today, I'm Scott Seamer. I'm Senior Manager with Kurt Summon. I'll be a co-lead on this project. Real quickly before I introduce my counterparts here, my background, I was most recently Chief Strategy Development Officer for Methodist Health System for about 4 years prior to joining Kurt Salmon. I've been with the consulting firm for about 2 years. Prior to Methodist, spent 15 years with Texas Health Resources. So worked in healthcare and strategy in the Metroplex over the last 20 years or so. Don?
Good afternoon. My name is Don Briones. I'm also the Senior Manager at Kurt Salmon. I work out of the San Francisco office. My emphasis with Kurt Salmon is in the strategy area, specifically in positioning and growth strategy, where I've been doing strategic engagements, specifically looking at market analysis and the effects of these market and future market areas as it relates to capital assets as well as service line strategies. Prior to my role at Kurt Salmon, I was a senior finance executive in the industry, in healthcare industry. Most notably, I was the Vice President of Finance with Alameda County Medical Center, now Alameda Health System, where I was the leader, one of the leadership in the formation of the public-private partnership that is now formed as Alameda Health System. I also held a Assistant Chief Financial Officer position at El Camino Hospital, which is a California hospital district, where I was one of the main participants in obtaining bond funding through general obligation bonds for their new healthcare organization, hospital building.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Chamberlain. I graduated with a Master's of Healthcare Administration from Trinity University down in San Antonio. Actually began my career on the provider side. I was an administrator for subacute rehab facilities for about 7 years. For the last 15 years, I've been at Kurt Salmon. I've been assisting hospitals and systems basically translate strategies into facility and capital asset decisions through master planning, through programming and functional design.
So, and a couple people that couldn't make it today because of conflicts with schedules with clients on other locations. Andy Backrote is a managing partner of our firm. It's also based here in the Metroplex. Andy has 30-plus years in consulting with Kurt Salmon. Jesse Baylock, also in our capital assets facility management practice. Leslie Marshburn is our subject matter expert around behavioral health services. And then we have Dr. Chang is the Associate Dean of Medicine at Stanford University. Will be a part of the team to address any clinical issues. And then Paul Murphy is our partner in our IT strategy practice as well. One of the things that we wanted to point out that we really like about our firm, all three of us have been on the other side of the table working for hospitals and health systems, post-acute organizations. We're a team that you'll be working with, that you'll see day to day. We'll be managing the process, be engaging in all of the workflow as well. We're not a national sales team, so this is why we wanted to introduce you to the team. The three of us will be managing the process throughout and then pulling in subject matter experts as we need to going forward. Real quickly about our firm. We're a small boutique healthcare strategy firm, roughly about 60 individuals across 4 practice verticals. And we intentionally design our organization this way. We have the strategy vertical. There's about 30 of us in there. We have offices located in Atlanta, Minneapolis, San Francisco, and New York. And then some of us are virtual. I still live here in the Metroplex. We also have the facility and capital asset practice that does a lot of master campus planning. And the two of us work really closely together so that we have a good understanding and a good working relationship so that we have we can look at key strategies, key market dynamics, changes in technology, and the changes in the way medicine is being practiced, and carry that forward into what the implications are from a facility standpoint. Our IT strategy provides a lot of the backbone and the infrastructure around the technology and the clinical information that you need across the spectrum of the health system. And then system integration planning. We work with health systems and organizations through a lot of different relationships on trying to pull pieces together. Kurt Salmon's been in practice since 1947, I believe. 81% of our clients are repeat clients. So we have worked with most of the top 100 health systems in the U.S. This gives you an idea. We typically, our customer bases, if you will, if we break those into groups, national health systems, and we work with national health systems both at a corporate level, looking at corporate strategy across the entire country or across their whatever markets or regions they're in. We'll also work with those national health systems in regional specific markets or specific hospital facilities as well. Community hospitals, 60 to 70% of what we do is with health systems and community hospitals. The other portion is with public health safety net hospitals as well as academic medical centers. And then behavioral health is a need that infuses everybody. It's a huge community need, and everybody's trying to figure out how to make it work. But we have expertise within the firm as well. But just wanted to give you a flavor of types of organizations that we've worked with, both here regionally in Texas and the Southwest and in the Metroplex, as well as across the country.
You have JPS up there. What specifically did you, or is this through your potential merger with?
No, actually, we worked a couple different times with JPS in the past. I think it was, this dates us a little bit, in 2003, 2004 timeframe. We worked with JPS on some clinical service line planning around cardiology, I believe, was the main focus. And then in 2008, 2009, we, as JPS moved into the new space, worked on activation planning. So how do we become most efficient operationally, maximize the space, look at any policies, procedures, operating protocols that need to change as we moved into that space.
And then the company that you're in the process of merging with?
We are in the process of a merger right now. I believe it hopefully will be effective at the end of the month. ECG Management Consulting, very similar firm to us, a little bit larger. They have offices across the country, Seattle, San Francisco, San Diego, Washington, Philadelphia. Very similar type of work and approach. I think we're very complementary. They also have an IT platform. They do a lot of electronic health record vendor selection process, which is what we do as well. They do not have a facility capital asset management group, so that's a good fit. From a strategy perspective, we probably do more high-level organizational strategy, while they have a little bit more expertise in physician compensation, specific service line physician alignment strategies.
And what they did, the most recent thing that they did with JPS was a part of the bond package strategic plan.
Scott, what is the most recent that this other corporation?
I believe the other firm we're talking about is ECG.
Correct.
And ECG most recently
assisted with the establishment of our multi-specialty physician group, and at the time of the alignment with the University of North Texas, and also helped us with some physician assessments and compensation models.
So it was mostly around the compensation structure?
I would say it's mostly around physician alignment and engagement.
Okay. Thank you.
So, and more as healthcare obviously becomes, it's a challenging industry. So more and more of our work is kind of blending organizations across these spectrums. So we're doing a lot of work with safety net hospitals. I'm working with Eskenazi, for example, in Indianapolis currently. We've worked with, most recently, Kaleida, University of Buffalo, on some service line distribution and co-management opportunities. So a pretty good array across the industry. So familiarity with your challenges. Wanted to speak to you a little bit around our process and the approach that we take. And while every organization is unique, we find that a lot of clients face similar challenges that they deal with from a long-term planning perspective. And as we look at your needs, there's some sensitivity around obviously looking at what the market analysis, the market assessment, looking at what the future holds. I want to speak to you about some of the variables that go into that, the approach that we take, and then looking at the future of JPS and what role JPS plays in the future. We know that the population in the DFW Metroplex is expected to grow 80 to 100%, almost double in the next 20 to 30 years. Demand will go up, just sheer number of people. We have the baby boomers coming into play over the next 10-year. Utilization will go up from that. We still have chronic behavioral health issues, chronic health conditions. We have to figure out a way to treat the community for those things. But then how do we balance that against new technology, advances in medicine, and what impact will those have? So we also want to look at strategies and relook at strategies and assumptions that we've made as an organization to challenge ways that perhaps we can be more effective, maximize our capital, maximize how we can be best serve the community. So for example, behavioral health. We're working with UC San Francisco, Eskenazi, Kaleida right now, and most recently St. Tammany down in New Orleans around behavioral health, looking at whether organizations want to have a consolidated behavioral health program or more of a distributed behavioral health program. Try to infuse behavioral health into different clinics, family practice centers, more ambulatory sites, and then what does that do from an inpatient component? Does it mean that we still have a single consolidated inpatient program, or do we try to have a distributed program for behavioral health? So that's a key strategy that we want to assess that will also have an impact on what future campus and facility asset needs will have. So there's a blend there, and then the last phase, obviously, working with you on public engagement process, as well as communicating key assumptions and what the plan is and what the impact is and what that the implications for the future role for JPS are over the future. Our public engagement process, we typically we'll work with you on making sure we're meeting all of your needs and actually come up with a specific way of doing this. We typically like to do about a two-step process where we'll have public engagement stakeholders, we'll bring them in, look at what the future needs are. It's more of an input process. What are your needs? What do you see as the future vision? Once we get towards the end of the work, then come back to that same group and say, this is, we've taken your input, we've analyzed the number, we've done the numbers, the market assessment. This is what it looks like in the future. Do you think this meets your needs? And Leslie Marshburn on our team, for example, with behavioral health, she has a conflict. She's actually working with St. Tammany on that process right now. So they're going back for public engagement, stakeholder town halls to get that input. So we wanted to outline key objectives and key deliverables along the way, and happy to address any questions you may have around that.
Can you talk just a little bit about how you're going to do, how you're going to solicit input from the community at large?
Yeah, a lot of times I think some key things that will be important for us is getting input from other healthcare organizations in our community, and how do they see our role today? How do they see the relationship today? How do they see that changing over time? A key item is also the relationships with the medical schools. How does that impact us over time? So those are key stakeholders. I don't know if you would bucket those into public feedback.
We wouldn't.
And then the other piece is then general public and community. We'll work with you on whether we want open or closed forums, but have more of a town hall. We'll work on establishing key questions, protocols around what we want to present, and then what is the stakeholder input that we want to receive. We typically do that up front and then come back towards the tail end of the process to have the same stakeholders as much as possible, but or have others come in to say, based on your input and our assessment, here's what we think the future of JPS looks like. Do you feel that this meets the needs? And again, have evaluation criteria, key questions that we can walk through that are consistent. We can actually measure from start to finish how those scores compare.
You brought up a moment ago, you used the term open or closed forum.
Yes, sir.
Define what you call a closed forum.
Well, whether it's an informal session that doesn't necessarily have to be recorded and presented for open records. It depends on what group you want and kind of what the rules and regulations are that we want to approach that with.
I would think that this process, we're hoping, I think, to make it as open as we can to the public. Now, I don't personally think you're going to be overwhelmed with hundreds and hundreds of people at every meeting you have, but there are some people who will pretty much want to be at, anytime you open the door to have a meeting, they're going to be there. And if you shut that door, that's not going to be good.
No, and we've worked in both situations before. I think the key thing that we want to, at least we want to demonstrate trust and transparency in the process. Give everyone an understanding of this is the situation we're in today. This is the industry today. Here's what we think is going to change over time, and what are the implications to us, and try to get buy-in into that process.
I guess my point is that I think you need to be real careful if you even consider to shut a door to the public or any time you're having a meeting.
Well, I guess one of the things that when I heard that, I thought, okay, if you're going to go out and interview key leaders and different folks, they may not be as open in that interview process if they know that none of their comments are going to be confidential. I agree with Gary, and I think everybody else on the court when I say that when you're presenting results or presenting discussions or asking for, in general, input, then those all need to be open meetings and invitations put out. And I guess one of the things that I saw in it, I was a little confused by one of the terms that you used in your more detailed presentation, I guess, to the other group, was steering committee, and I couldn't quite figure out. There was a steering committee, and then there was a citizens blue ribbon committee, and I couldn't figure out exactly what the difference was or what that steering committee was made up of.
The steering committee, typically, and we'll organize it in any form or fashion, but the way we typically organize the work is that the steering committee will be made up of individuals that are internal to the organization and administration and leadership roles with JPS Health, as well as county administration. They're really going to be the body that will have some subgroups that do some work but report back up to that to really kind of organize the material, the analysis, draw key conclusions that will then be presented to the county commissioners as well as the JPS board. Blue Ribbon stakeholder committee was more of the public engagement process. And again, we'll follow a process based on what your needs are and what you desire to do. We've worked in multiple different ways of doing that. Agree, the best way to develop trust and buy-in is through an open process as much as possible, but I still think it's going to be key to get individual input from other organizations in the community.
JPS is a publicly funded safety net healthcare organization for Tarrant County.
Right.
As a result, public engagement has to be serious. It has to be one of the key important priorities of this project. Okay? It is not there just to validate trust or just to create buy-in. It must be a serious attempt to obtain inputs from the taxpayers as to what role JPS should play in the healthcare landscape of the future 50 years or so. So in your experience as an organization, have you ever led a process through a public engagement that I would consider serious? Not just for public buy-in, I'm talking about serious public engagement.
Absolutely.
Can you name some of those and describe what you went through?
University of New Mexico, we've worked with them on establishing continued support for a mill levy that they need to support the ongoing operations of the organization. It's not only the academic for the state, but it's the only safety net and trauma center for the entire state of New Mexico. With them, we've had, I think the process we went through is we identified 5 town hall sessions that were open to the public, garnered input throughout that process. With them, we were doing a strategic planning process, as well as they wanted to do a replacement tower for an old aging infrastructure. But it was really garnering input on there's a lot of overlap and commonality between the community health needs assessment as well, around what the community needs, what the health needs are, how can we as an organization support those long term. That was sort of the input process. And then towards the tail end, we consolidated the 5 town halls down to 3, larger time allocation, but came back with, based on the input that we received and the assessment that we did, this is what we think the future looks like. And this is what we need in order to serve the community. And established criteria of, does this meet the needs? I'm trying to think of another example. St. Tammany in New Orleans, we're down there right now addressing specific to behavioral health. Similar process, we did one public session around a town hall forum to garner input around what the plan is, and we're now back having a town hall on what the strategic plan is for that organization going forward and what the implications are from a facility, scope of services, types of physicians, types of providers we need in order to serve that community.
And have you ever faced situations in which the public feedbacks are in conflict with the feedback that you obtained from the leadership of the organization? And how did you rectify that?
Constantly run into that.
Okay. How do you rectify and create that equilibrium?
We actually use a polling software. So again, it's establishing some criteria and some key questions up front where we can actually poll the audience and participation to get, typically we'll have a few that are outliers that don't think it's the right plan or the right direction, but by polling we actually have data that supports that, whatever it may be. Majority, 90%, 50% tells us that yes, this is the right way. When we get down into the middle, or you get a minority response, we have to reassess that. So it's actually, it gives you data to support the process as well.
Okay, so you obtain data to support the new direction.
We try to as much as possible, yes.
Thank you.
I guess my only suggestion would be, you mentioned that a steering committee would be made up of staff and things, basically insiders. I disagree with that. I think that steering committee needs to include maybe a combination of people, maybe one member each from the Commissioners Court appointed, a few existing board members possibly, or all the board, or and then insider department heads, people that, maybe a combination, but don't make it all insiders. That's not going to work.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And we'll work with you all on how to organize that work. The key thing that drives that is obviously the process and the types of analytics that we'll go through. So some of the challenges that we face, let me give you a quick example of some of the things that we'll look at. Population, demographic driven growth and demand. So we look at utilization historically within any given service line by age cohort. So as the population grows, as the proportion of different age cohorts changes over time, utilization shifts within that as well. We'll also look at, from a strategic standpoint, do we have access to physicians and care providers over time? Do we have strategic risks and challenges that we need to be aware of? From a financial sustainability standpoint, when we look at the funding sources that support our organization, we'll do some modeling and some risk assessment of where we have some key variables that we need to be leery of. We'll kind of run the gamut on other things that impact what the future utilization and demand of the organization is going to be. And we'll do that, and we can do that in any time increments. We'll typically do 5, 10, 20, and 30-year increments. 20 and 30 years starts to get a little bit more challenging because you have significant shifts in technology that are unforeseen and just not developed yet. But we'll also look at changes within any given service line on care models and how care is delivered historically and how that may shift over time. And then the other key piece of that is we'll build a financial model. So the market model feeds into the financial model. Key strategies, key assumptions that we'll work with the organization on. When we can run some sensitivity and risk assessment as well. We'll have a baseline financial model. And the thing we do really well is not just looking at what the investment is and return on an investment, but we'll look at overall cash flow implications to the entire organization. So those are two things that we, from a process standpoint, we try to incorporate as many variables as we can in that process. When we look at how we typically organize our thought process, kind of the three big buckets are growth and positioning, clinical integration, as well as value strategy. So within growth and positioning, we'll look at access, geographic reach. How do we distribute the care that we need to provide to the community? Clinical breadth and depth. What service lines with trauma, stroke, cardiology, behavioral health, what other types of service lines can we really flourish and continue to grow and provide and meet community needs, and also provide financial sustainability to the organization? From a clinical integration strategy, how do we align with physicians on the way that we provide care, standardize care across all different sites, as well as look at opportunities to reduce cost and look at shifts in payment methodology and transformation over time. And then from a value proposition, looking at reducing cost, improving quality and satisfaction along the way. And then start to look at, from a population health standpoint, how do we change the way that we care for chronic conditions? We have behavioral health issues, we have asthma, COPD, there's even dental care is a big need in the community. So how do we continue to define who we are as an organization and our role for carrying the community going forward? This looks again at some of the variables that we look at from a planning process standpoint. I'll give you an example. Kaleida and University of Buffalo. Kaleida was looking at some challenges from a financial sustainability standpoint. Over time, had some strengths in key service lines, but in other service lines just didn't have the clinical providers, the reputation in the market, and just struggled with them financially. But together, you could take two organizations and really look at, and what we did with them is facilitate the conversation of clinical distribution. So Kaleida is going to focus in on behavioral health and cardiology. University of Buffalo can focus in on other service lines that Kaleida couldn't provide at the same level of strength, but University of Buffalo could, in doing so in a partnership through a joint operating agreement. So that's, again, it's a little bit different than just pure demographic and utilization-driven forecasting and what the financial implications of those are, but also looking at strategic partnerships and more effective ways that we could perhaps serve the community that could potentially reduce what our capital needs are and facility needs are. From a behavioral health standpoint, we worked with Eskenazi, for example, in Indianapolis, shifting their strategy from behavioral health from a consolidated single site of care for behavioral health that the state and the region fed into more of a distributed model. And what that means is creating new space for care providers in their family care sites and their ambulatory care sites that they had in the community. It reduced, and we actually came up with 3 smaller inpatient facilities in a more distributed model, completely different geographies than a single consolidated behavioral health program. So again, I know we want to really look at what the future demand is for the county and what our role is in that, but we also have to factor in some key strategies of how we want to approach that going forward.
So in looking at the distributive model of providing behavioral health services, that is not to the exclusion of inpatient units.
No, not at all. Well, I mean, we need to look at, we didn't include it in here from a time commitment standpoint. I think it's about 22 different types of behavioral health services across the behavioral health continuum that can be provided. And we look at distribution within each of those 22. And not to say that distribution or consolidated is an either-or decision. And we're not saying that one is right or one is wrong. It depends on the factors in the organization. So there's financial implications, there's care provider implications, there's culture implications of what the physicians and the organization and what the community needs as well. So, and a lot of it's going to be looking at access, travel times, how do patients access care in a timely fashion. There's a lot of different things that play into it. So it's a really deep, detailed analysis that we'll look at.
How do you handle things like stabilization, which in my mind can best be handled only in an inpatient environment? How would you handle that if you've got all of your resources spread all over heck and back?
Well, and you're exactly right. We need to look at which care providers we have, where they're accessing the health system. Are there pockets of need from a geographic standpoint as well? A lot of it's going to be based on the input from the public as well as the analysis of the data. I just wanted to give you a flavor of the types of analyses that we do, and then an example of one organization where we shifted their historical approach into a new methodology.
How'd that work for them?
It's going well. They're actually now looked at within the state. They have other organizations approaching them because behavioral health is challenging for anybody. Just the economics haven't been there. Indiana has expanded Medicaid. There's now funding for it. It's not great funding, but while it's a little bit more competitive now, they're seen as the experts in how to provide care in a low-cost setting.
That brings up another
It brings
issue.
up a whole slew of other conversations.
It does bring up a whole slew of other issues, considering that Texas is not a Medicaid expansion state.
Correct.
So it's
completely apples to oranges from that point of view.
Correct. So project approach and management, this is how we foresee that the bulk of it. We'll have a core team. Those are key contacts, folks that will help with the gathering of data, the assessment of the data. We're working with closely on scheduling meetings, next steps, communication more than anything else. The steering committee typically is the body that does the bulk of the work. We'll do the work, but we facilitate that review back through the steering committee. We've identified probably the need for several strategic work groups that can do a little bit more of a deep dive, and we'll work with the organization on refining exactly how we would want to do that. Potential work groups would be the medical school partnerships, behavioral health, other key service lines, as well as community partnerships. We could even do a work group specifically around public engagement, which would really help us work on the criteria, the questions that we would want to ask in the town hall forums, if that's the approach we wanted to take. And then the steering committee, we anticipate communicating constantly, but having routine meetings, and then from there, taking this information back through JPS Board of Managers and essentially up to the county commissioners. The Blue Ribbon Committee, again, we'll structure this however we want, or however you want, but whether that's directly through the steering committee or the commissioners court, we can best meet your needs and arrange that a little bit differently.
One of the things that I would just point out that I'm going to hopefully will have is just about after every time you're updating or presenting to the steering committee, I want a presentation of the commissioners court.
Okay.
And if not at the same, I mean, it can be at the same time, but quite honestly, I believe that for the next 6 months, we ought to have a constant agenda item that says this deal, so that at any point in time, if you've made a report to the steering committee, I want to know the details that gets to it, because I don't want to get to the end of this thing and everybody's looked at in the weeds, and sometimes this frustrates some of my, because I do like to get into the weeds a lot. But I just don't want to wait till the last minute and you come to us and say, okay, here it is, take it or leave it. And it be, oh, by the way, you got to act today or you delay everything and cost us more money.
That's fine. We do that all the time. I've been working with Ascension and Adventist, two big national faith-based not-for-profit health systems in specific regions of the country. Their corporate offices want that, so we're doing monthly executive briefings for them as well.
And in addition, and I think it goes back to what we discussed or what you heard earlier about transparency or about an open process, is some sort of a master calendar that indicates when meetings are occurring, if folks want to be a part of those meetings, and that can be plastered all over the county's website, JPS's website, wherever it be, so that everybody, and like this one right here, we're taping this. It's live right now. So if somebody knew but couldn't be here, they can at least be watching it. And so as many of your meetings, especially where you're reporting, those need to be in settings and environments so they can be streamed live, and we not have a question about, well, nobody knew this, and with documents ahead of time.
That's no problem. We do that routinely. In fact, I would ask my colleagues here to verify this, but I'm pretty sure every meeting we ever have, we actually start with process and timeline update, which just goes to making sure that are we communicating effectively, is the process still on track or not.
And it is also typical for us that in engagements where we are inviting a number of transparent situations, that we do in the case of, say, a steering committee that is driven in nonprofit private organizations on an internal basis, that we do include members of the board or other governing bodies as a preview, so that we were able to then, when we go to the additional public sessions, that there is no surprises, even from an internal perspective from the governing board.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yes, sir.
The JPS Board of Managers is the body that govern and operate JPS on a daily basis. So whatever the new direction that this process produces, the JPS Board of Managers will be responsible for leading that direction.
Correct.
So how do you, in this structure that you are showing here, how do you make sure that the JPS Board Managers are not isolated? Or it's very important that they are taking a leading role in this process. Not just the Commissioners Court. The JPS Board of Managers must be taking an active and aggressive and proactive role in this. How do you make sure that that will happen?
Well, we'll work with you to make sure that we're cross-pollinating with membership. We're having, routine updates, meetings with them on every step of the process. We'll work with you the best way to figure it out. We want to be sensitive to everybody's time commitment and making effective use of everybody's time as well. If we can, go ahead.
It's typical in our project series that we at the middle or towards the end of each phase, we include the governing board, such as the Board of Managers, in the communication process. So as we start to get to the point where the content and the
Only
results...
in the communication process?
No. Oftentimes we include the Board of individuals such as the Board of Managers in a body like the steering committee. However, if we want to address the full Board of Managers, it's often we provide check-in meetings with the Board of Managers to ensure that they're up to speed in terms of the progress of the project. So an example, if we have a steering committee that's set on a monthly basis, it's typical that we also have meetings set with the Board of Managers, sometimes on a monthly basis if needed. Sometimes it's at the near the end of a milestone when there's significant content that can be presented to them. Oftentimes it depends on the client in terms of how much information and interest that they wish to receive at that point. So as Scott is saying, we can be flexible where if the information need is great, we can have a communication with the Board of Managers at the, pretty much at the same time as the steering committee in that regard.
I think we don't have a lot of flexibility in this particular area, in my opinion, because whatever direction this process produces, it is the JPS Board of Managers who will lead it and make it happen. And if they do not buy in, if they don't agree with this new direction, if they feel like the product of this process has already been determined without their input or without their agreement, we basically have created a non-productive process.
Shoot yourself.
So it's very important that the JPS Board of Managers have to get involved.
Right.
I don't think there's a lot of flexibility there. They have to be in this.
Absolutely.
So how do you make sure that happens?
Well, we usually start off with interviews, individual interviews, and then it was Don who was saying we can cross-pollinate key members if that's appropriate, but we definitely want to make sure before we're having routine communication, before we're making decisions that need to be agreed to, we want to have participatory process, and so we can have we can work with you on organizing the best way to do that.
I don't want to speak for Commissioner Fickus, but I think the point he's trying to make is that the Board of Managers is a co-equal governing body to Commissioners Court. So anything you give to Commissioners Court, you need to at the same time give to the Board of Managers and bring everybody along at the same rate, at the same time, at the same pace.
I'm just making the assumption that the presentations that are coming to us have already been through, quote-unquote, the steering committee or the JPs. And I'm not saying that there may not be instances when maybe the Board of Managers and the Commissioners Court gets them at the same time. I would never expect that we would get it before the Board of Managers. But it's very likely that we could, instead of you making 3 different presentations, you may make one that includes steering committee, Board of Managers, in Commissioners Court, and we all have an opportunity to discuss and and to be able to go through that and hear each other's discussions and thoughts. I agree with Commissioner Wynn. I mean, obviously, the Board of Managers has got to do it, but at the same time, as we commission this process, we said that this court is the one that's ultimately going to call the election if it results in a bond election and decides what's going to be included in that particular regard. I can't help but believe that that's only going to be with the agreement and support of the Board of Managers.
Correct.
It's got you about 5 minutes.
I think you need to rework.
He's got as much time as he wants because we've been stopping him all along the way and asking him. So, I mean, I hope he's within about 5 minutes, but.
And we can rework this. Basically, we wanted to identify the key stakeholder groups, recognizing who this needs to be vetted with, who needs to have agreement with it and a voice in the process, and then ultimately approval. High-level work plan is a 5-month process. Phase 1 is really looking at the market assessment and what the future outlook, future demand projections are going to be. Phase 2 then is based on the key strategies that we want to take as an organization, what our future role is. And then Phase 3 is the communication and stakeholder engagement. We have a piece of that on the front end, but also circling back at the tail end to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the plan. And as I mentioned, we have a 5-month workflow in here as well. So happy to address any additional questions. I think just we would love to do this and work with you. I think the key thing for you to know is Don and I and Dave are going to be the individuals that drive this process that you'll be working with. We have support staff of consultants and analysts. Andy, our managing partner, will be at all the key meetings as well. And we have local presence and industry expertise that I think our combination of both consulting as well as being in the healthcare industry is unmet by a lot of firms. So happy to address any other questions or concerns you may have.
Define your firm's understanding of the scope of this project and what do you believe the deliverables are?
We would basically want to look at over the next 5, 10, 30 years what the demand is going to be in the community for healthcare needs, and then defining what the JPS role is to meet those needs. And then based on that, this is sort of, I know, your first work, that's going to generate a facility and capital asset and resource needs. So looking at what your key rooms are, how we distribute those resources, size and locations of the organization, ultimately to get you to that third phase of implementing it. So we know we're kind of the front end of that piece.
Thank you.
In your price and your estimated fees, you got $670,000, and then below that you've got plus other charges, and then plus, I think, allocated charges. Or is the 670 the guaranteed maximum?
There's a price of, there's a 500 and something, the 670.
All I see is 670.
670 is including, that's the maximum. If our travel expenses come in less than what we expect, we'll actually bill less than that amount.
Okay, so the 670 is?
Not to exceed.
That's drive it off the lot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And again, to emphasize, 670 is the absolute maximum. We do bill items like travel as incurred, so it's likely impossible that that will actually be lower than that.
Well, that was my question. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't, if whatever reasons, trips, whatever, it ain't going over 670.
No.
Okay.
And your firm is not a minority-owned enterprise, right?
We're not.
You're not, okay, thank you.
What kind of diversity do you have on the team that's going to be involved in this project?
Well, pretty diverse group.
Tell me about it.
Well, it depends on, we need to kind of factor in who the consultants and the analysts will be.
Well, one thing I can say is that I'll be one of the engagement co-leaders on this, and from that perspective, we also have other individuals on the team that identify with and have had experience in terms of a wide range of demographics in terms of serving demographics, both on the clinical perspective as well as administrative perspective. In addition to that, the experience that we've had dealing and working in public health organizations, in the industry as well, in terms of understanding the needs from a diversity perspective, we can bring that to the table with the current leadership team that we have.
Are you anticipating to partner with some local firms to help you with the public engagement portion? Or are you planning to do that in-house?
We don't foresee needing to partner with anybody at this point, so we'll do that in-house.
Thank you.
I mean, we could change, if you all felt differently that we would be better served in doing it differently, we would definitely consider that.
Mr. Briones, you understand that serving diverse populations is not the same as being a member of that diverse population.
I understand, sir.
Any other questions? Thank y'all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Let's, if we can, maybe get back in here about 1:15.
Where is that budget information?
Let me first ask our team members that are here today, and we have two, Pat Terrell and Lori Weiselberg, who could not join us today due to scheduling conflicts, to give you a brief outline of their experience and background, both in operational and in strategy work for publicly financed healthcare in the public sector. Linda, would you like to be first?
Certainly. Good afternoon. It's nice to see everyone. A little bit about myself. My name is Linda Wertz. I am a native Texan, and I grew up in Granbury, Texas. So Fort Worth was a bit of stomping grounds for me. Just recently, I have changed my relationship with HMA and moved into a subcontractor role. But prior to that, I was managing principal in the Texas HMA office, which is in Austin, for 5.5 years. Prior to that time, I did 10 years of women-owned business and was also the state Medicaid director, deputy commissioner for Medicaid and CHIP for the state of Texas. I was in that position almost 7 years. I have about 40 years of experience in Medicaid. Basically, my entire career has been in that field in some form or another. While with HMA, and most recently, I have been actively working on the 1115 waiver, as you're familiar with, and the Disrupt projects. HMA had two roles in relationship to that particular project. We had a set of team that worked with the state in the development of the 1115 waiver and working with CMS and the negotiations. And then another team worked with the regional healthcare partnerships, of which JPS is your RHP for this particular region. We worked with 5 regions and currently continue to work with Region 4, would be one of the clients that I continue to work with. So I look forward to being
Describe Region 4 for me.
Region 4 is Corpus Christi.
Corpus Christi.
So it's the 21 counties surrounding Corpus and Victoria. So look forward to being a part of this team and be happy to answer any questions.
Jeff?
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Smith. I'm a managing principal with HMA out of the Phoenix, Arizona office. I'm also a native Texan, although I was born one county over, but lived most of my time here in Austin. I've been in healthcare for about 35 years, and mostly as a consultant and working with the state, federal, public health systems to develop managed care, mostly around Medicaid and CHIP programs, developing 1115 waivers, 1915 waivers, state plan amendments, and a variety of activities managing that process. clients included states like New York and New Jersey and Georgia, a number of large states over many, many years. So my role here is going to be project management, and I will be working with this team and with your team to help keep us connected.
Great.
Good afternoon. My name is Ray Jankowski. I am the managing principal with the Southern California office of HMA. I will be the finance lead on this engagement. I have more than 35 years of healthcare experience with a pretty much heavy financial emphasis. I have an MBA in finance, and I'm a CPA. I started my career mostly on the provider side, on the hospital side. I've worked for 4 different hospitals. 3 of them were safety net hospitals. One of them had was virtually 85 to 90% Medicaid and dually eligible clients that it served. I was chief financial officer for 3 of those 4 hospitals as well. I also was the founding chief financial officer for CalOptima, which runs the Medicaid managed care delivery system in Orange County, California. California is unique in that it delegates on a county level the delivery of managed care. And so CalOptima is a single organization that handles that, and I had the good fortune to be the initial CFO and later the COO, and then also I did a lot of network development where we worked with the providers in the community. So I had the good fortune to do that. Since I've been at HMA for a little over 4 years, I've done a lot of public health work. I've worked with the city and county of San Francisco, Los Angeles County, Ventura County. I did some strategic planning work with Alameda County last year. And I also did some work with the Health Plus Hospital System in New York City earlier this year. And I had the good fortune also to be involved with a public-private partnership opportunity in South LA, which has one of the toughest healthcare demographics, if you will, in terms of statistics in the United States. And so we did some work there in trying to develop a public-private partnership. So I would look forward to working with the county and JPS and all the stakeholders as you try to move forward with your delivery system. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I guess it is afternoon now. Good afternoon. I'm Karen Duncan, and I have been with HMA out of the Atlanta office for 2 years now, and I will be overseeing and driving the delivery system work. I've actually grown up in the safety net world. I am a board-certified pediatrician and have spent over 25 years practicing general pediatrics in one of the largest neighborhood health centers in Atlanta, in an inner-city community. And I am very much about community. I spent not only a lot of time practicing pediatrics, but I spent a lot of time in the community, partnering with the community, understanding that I alone could not care for these children, but needed the community to help. Pride myself with some innovative ways of doing that, placing nurses into schools, our own nurses into schools, that we can partner and be able to do education of health within the schools. Also worked with the Y on education and on fitness, had a lot of fitness programs for children to help fight obesity in the neighborhood. So I have a real interest in how the community can work with hospitals in delivering care, understanding that hospitals alone cannot do it. I moved into medical leadership. I was with Emory University at the time and helped to train many of the residents and the nurse practitioners and the PAs that now deliver health care throughout the United States. The community providers at that time were turned into employed physicians, so I actually went from an academic employment to a hospital employed physician, and that was an interesting transition for us. But during that time, I got really interested. I thought to myself, hey, you know, I can make a change, and how do I do that? And so I got really interested in the operations and moved into a position, a senior vice president over ambulatory operations for Grady Health System. So I feel like I've started from the ground, been out in the community. I went back at the time that I was appointed as senior vice president at Grady Hospital. I went back and got my MBA, so I better understand what it means to sit at the executive table and understand what everyone is talking about. I, as I said, now have been with HMA for 2 years, and I have served and continue to serve at Cook County Health and Hospital System, which is also very interesting, very unionized, very public system. Everything we do is out in the public. It has a strong, very much like here, has a lot of leadership from your commissioners and also from the board of the hospital which I serve. I was in a small community hospital that Cook County had thought at one time that they would let go just because it was losing money. And I was asked to come in, help prepare them for Joint Commission. And then along with my HMA colleagues, we were able to develop a strategy based on understanding what the community needs were, the importance of that hospital to the community. And we have developed a strategy, and I am now working with them to actually implement that strategy, which includes new construction for that community. Most recently, I've been pulled to sit in an interim chief operating position at Cook County Health and Hospital System. And so we are going through the same thing that you are, although you're going at it at county level. We have been going through it at a hospital level. And as I said, they are very public, so we've had to have a lot of stakeholder meetings. We've had to have a lot of community meetings. We spent a huge amount of time communicating this to all of our stakeholders before actually adopting it, which we most recently adopted. So this is really the kind of work that HMA does, and that I'm really excited about being a part of. And I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity. I feel very humbled to really be before you. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. A little bit about myself. I'm Warren Lyons on the San Francisco office, but more in the past was a longtime resident in Philadelphia. My background is hospital administration and physician network strategy. I spent a number of years at Alameda County Medical Center as the Chief Strategy and Integration Officer. It's a public hospital authority in Alameda on the East Bay of San Francisco. Before that, I spent a very long time at Temple University Health System in Philadelphia, which is the de facto public hospital, in that the state of Pennsylvania does not have public hospitals, but it certainly has patients in need of public care. I was the Executive Vice President's Chief of Staff, Chief Operating Officer of the Physician Network, about 131 physicians in 40 locations, and had also operational accountability for the academic hospitals, pathology, radiology, laboratory, as well as the critical care transportation and helicopter service. So I come from the provider side, both on strategy and on operations. And I'm delighted to be able to bring myself, our team, and those who are not here today, that I'll mention briefly, to both your need to look at the county-wide need for care and how the future over the next 10 to 30 years will roll out, but we're grounded in experience in working with public boards and working with physicians, with nurse practitioners, with that medical assistant that takes your temperature, that front office clerk in the clinics that greets the person coming into the door and perhaps holds their hand as they leave. So we bring both ends of that equation, as well as Ray pointed out, deep experience in the managed care world, which is something that certainly is impacting Tarrant County. Pat Terrell and Lori Weiselberg could not make it today. I wanted to mention their roles. Pat is our vice president, one of our vice presidents, and was one of the key leaders of a number of engagements which we have offered to you as our experience, including the Dallas County Court Commissioner's engagement in 2004. She also led the restructuring work of the San Francisco Department of Public Health, and over the last several years, including recently in Los Angeles County. And if you ask Pat, she'll tell you also that she was a key actor in the post-Katrina rebuild of New Orleans health system. And that was a challenge, of course, that you can all appreciate. Lori Weiselberg, who could not be here, is our subject matter expert on the stakeholder engagement, and along with Linda And with Karen and myself, Jeff and Ray, we'll be very focused on having a transparent approach, but a disciplined approach. Lori brings that to the table. Short bit about our firm. We're 31 years old, started out and continue to be focused on publicly financed health care, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, charity care. The strength is our people. We have the technology, we have the data analytics, but at the end of the day, to have actionable information that you and the JPS board can act on takes the people who you're seeing here today and our team to bring the resources and the skill and talent to listen to you and give you what you want. We do a lot of things, and they're all connected, as you certainly know, in the review of healthcare in Tarrant County, from strategic planning, community needs assessment, long-term care services and supports as our population ages, and correctional health. We, in fact, have a core group of nationally certified experts in correctional health and are doing work in a number of jails throughout the country, including Los Angeles, San Mateo. And we see, very importantly, that behavioral health and correctional health intersect, and we bring that to the table. What have we done that's relevant to your needs? We've listed a number of opportunities that we've worked on in the past that involve policy, positioning, market analysis, stakeholder engagement. As Linda indicated, deep involvement with the Texas DSRIP program, with the Innovation Model Design application. Los Angeles County, Cook County, as Karen has talked about, San Francisco. We did include in our materials the Dallas County report that we presented and worked with your counterparts at the court. And Maricopa Integrated Health System is an interesting world. It's in Phoenix. We helped a newly constituted board formed by statute to reorganize the public hospital system in Phoenix and in Maricopa County, in which it's located, and help that board see forward a strategy that would better work for those individuals in Maricopa County needing both acute care, psychiatric care, ambulatory care. And recently, myself personally worked with a number of our team members, and we helped the Maricopa elected board renegotiate its relationship with its medical group of 350 physicians, both parties of which wanted to have a new relationship focused on community benefit, focused on value-based payment that would incent both parties to bring the right care at the right time to the people who live in Maricopa County. And we were successful in getting a new contract, which I think is a model of care that we are taking to other clients of ours.
When did you finish that?
May of this year. So we
And that was the
completed
Board of Supervisors there in Maricopa County?
It was the Maricopa Integrated Health District Board, which is separate from the county board, but they are elected directly by the community. So it's a separate authority. And we finished that engagement in April. The board ratified that contract in May. And we hope that that's going to help bring to fruition the original work that we performed earlier in 2006. San Francisco, Los Angeles, these are large communities, populations that are diverse as they are here, and with strong voices, with strong constituent viewpoints. And part of the work that we do is reflecting, hearing, and reporting back to this board, to the JPS board, what we are learning and guiding the work of this type of engagement. Here's our team. We have assignments. It's not vague. And Linda and Pat as advisors. Linda will also be working, of course, on the stakeholder engagement. Jeff is our project manager to keep us on time with clear communication to you, to the JPS board, to the community. These are complicated matters, and if they become opaque, then I think you lose support. I'll handle the environmental section and the final report synthesis along with our team. Dr. Duncan, delivery system, Ray on finance, Lori Weiselberg will handle stakeholder engagement. But all of us are going to be involved with all of these aspects. These are not silos of projects that will report back to you and you wonder, did they talk to each other?
Warren, would you
Sir.
explain just very briefly what you mean by environment?
Sure. The environment is looking at first, and part of our deliverables, what is the community's health needs throughout Tarrant County? Similar to as you see hospitals do community health needs assessment, the environment is what are the community health needs? What are the reimbursement and what are the trends in how the market is moving in terms of population projections? What are the changes in attitude towards where and how we educate our physicians and nurses and other providers? So it's the environmental piece of your request, of your proposal, that would address medical education. It would address the gap in services and the demand for services projected out and how to fill that gap. It's very connected, of course, to delivery, finance, and stakeholder engagement. And we've broken out our deliverables in a table that we'll show to you in a few slides that shows how we have tried to give you deliverable, constant stream of draft reports for early review and adjustment, because it's like sailing. You know, the winds change and you see how the course is going, and we want to be sure that we are not working off-site and coming back to you 6 months later with something that you are surprised at.
And this would include the futurist piece.
Absolutely.
The way the medical delivery system is changing.
Yes.
And where we need to be going in order to respond to that futurist predictive model.
With the understanding that that's very dynamic.
Of course.
And it will require a lot of adaptability by the organization and by the county. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all looking for that crystal ball, but.
We're hoping you brought yours.
I did, I really did.
And looking at some of the stuff in this, the larger notebook, I guess, that you brought, it appears at least that you are really going to hone in and focus on Tarrant County specifically and not just regional numbers or not just state numbers. And also that as it looks through your interviews, you're treating it not so much as to competitiveness with other healthcare organizations within Tarrant County, but really focusing on the safety net aspects of the hospital, as well as collaboration and working in public-private partnerships, as opposed to necessarily competitive type stuff.
Exactly so. Your proposal has those themes of collaboration, of partnership, and that is exactly what needs to happen in every county in this country. There are many providers of the medically indigent in Tarrant County that are not JPS, although JPS is a key part of that. We have, I'm sure, physicians, physician groups, other hospitals. They are providing care now to the safety net population, and our assessment is to look at everyone who provides care, not just at the classic public hospital safety net organization. And it's so true in my work at Alameda County Medical Center and at Temple. Our best partners in Philadelphia were the University of Pennsylvania and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and some of the federally qualified health centers who were the primary caregivers in the very difficult neighborhoods of North Philadelphia. So, Judge, yes, we view this as a county-wide assessment, with JPS as certainly a key component in how it will work in the future.
So we see this from the patient, and where is the best place that they can be provided the care? And not really about what the hospital, but really, where is it that we can place that patient that gives them the best, the highest quality, the kindest care, but understanding the fiscal responsibilities that the county and the hospitals have, and the framework in which they need to work. And I mean, safety nets have always done it with little resource, but they've been able to do that. And I think that's what we really can provide for you. But we really see it from the patient side of it. So it's not about competition, because the patient doesn't see it from that side.
That's absolutely right. And there's enough need out there for everyone to do their fair share. Whole person care is a phrase that you often will hear in some of the Medicaid innovations, and whole person care is similar to what I'll call whole community care, involving everyone in their civic duty to do what they can to to help those most in need. Communication. We're a team. You have many teams. We very much want to be sure that, as we are promising in our proposal, to have weekly on-site presence, to communicate on a monthly basis with this court, with the JPS board, with the staff of JPS, with the staff of other providers who are part of the discussion, to give you, of those 13 deliverables in the booklet, a constant stream of information, because some of it may be off course, it may need adjustment, and these are dynamic processes. We hope to complete this process in learning from you today and subsequently, if we are successful in this bid, what you need in terms of communication, and give you that constant sense that things are going in the correct direction. Our approach: market analysis, gap analysis, stakeholder engagement, and evaluation reports were in your report. We've divided up our work in terms of the environment, stakeholder engagement, finance and delivery system, and a final report. These are the 13 deliverables. And I'll leave it to you how much you wish to discuss any of these. We've provided both in the full proposal and in your booklet today, not only the deliverable, but why would you need this deliverable to give you a solution and a set of recommendations that this court, that the Blue Ribbon Committee, that the JPS board, and the community as a whole would embrace and say, yes, this is a good vision, this is a good idea of a model of care that is patient-focused. So throughout these deliverables, there's an ability for us to provide not only information and analytics, but importantly to guide the kinds of questions that all of us will ask in the stakeholder interviews, both the public meetings as well as individual private meetings, which are important to hear voices that may wish to not be public, but have a strong opinion. We want the work that we do to go back and forth between what we're analyzing, what we're reporting, how we ask questions, going back to the stakeholder groups, reassessing and re-asking questions, so that at the end of the day, there are consistencies in how we look at the market nationally and regionally, how we look at Tarrant County, where JPS is going, what may or may not happen with Medicaid and DSRIP, how our physician providers are going to be trained in the future, including the important assessment of the second medical school. And one of the things that Karen certainly has experience, I do as well, at academic medical centers, we have a number of team members who have served as chief medical officer of academic hospital-based systems. That dynamic is also going to be a key point.
I want to be sure on when you say 2 medical schools, that it's not necessarily 2 medical schools, it's a DO and an MD, but they're out of the same, for all intents and purposes, out of the same institution.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Partially.
Yeah, something.
And regardless of that, the dynamic of how JPS and others train our physicians and nurse practitioners and other providers is absolutely an important part of this work. We need to replace the generation of providers that we have, and as a benefit to the county, it's been seen elsewhere that having an engaged community with medical education provides a pathway up for people in the community who would like to get into healthcare. And what better way to find your career is to be tracked into nursing, to medical education. The training programs at JPS and other hospitals will continue to be an important source, not only of research, but also innovation in terms of how primary and specialty care is given.
How do you plan to tie these deliverables to the core mission of the hospital district, which originally was created to take care of the indigent population?
Mm-hmm.
So being able to come up with these deliverables, I think on point, but you have to tie it to that mission, justify it. Otherwise, it may be outside the scope. If there are multiple initiatives that we can take on as a public hospital, but the important is we have to do so in a way that we do not lose focus on the core mission of the hospital. So on these deliverables, how do you work to make sure that they are justified in terms of alignment with the core mission of the hospital?
Sure. Our focus is on the medically indigent population and their needs for health care in Tarrant County. And certainly the strategic mission and goal of JPS is to serve the community which needs access to care. Any of these efforts will look at that population, will look at how JPS currently and in the future with its facility replacement options can provide access to care not only on the JPS campus but at the many ambulatory care sites. And what is the role in the future of a public hospital as the changing reimbursements move towards what you've heard probably too often, value-based payment and value-based care from volume? What are the best strategies that your JPS leadership can use to effectively provide care not only at the hospital but throughout the community with partnerships? The strategies will have to be aligned, and I believe part of our initial work, which we call the Community Health Needs Assessment, will start to identify where in the county there may be gaps in service that can be provided by JPS, but perhaps by others in a collaborative way rather than in isolation.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think you ask an excellent question that safety net hospitals struggle with, because they are so mission driven for the largest part. But there's a lot of competing priorities, as you said, with your medical schools, with what the community wants. And it's really about keeping that out in front and really having those individuals who understand that mission, at the table anytime there's strategy around how medical schools will deliver their training within organizations. We have to have that mission in front of them. It has to align with it and not go off on its own with research that's outside of what the hospital wants to do. So I think that's an excellent question that many struggle with and that we've got to come closer to.
Well, on that point, you mentioned a moment ago that it's very important that we understand that we alone cannot take care of the entire indigent population.
That's right.
We need a community of healthcare service providers to do that. How do you work in this process to formulate a strategic partnerships with other healthcare organizations so that they will work in conjunction with JPS instead of even perceive in a competitive way? How do we position ourselves in this process, in your opinion and expertise?
Yeah, and I think this is probably ideal time. I know in Chicago, as we looked at pediatrics, and all hospitals are, and I have to say it's because of the wonderful pediatricians delivering those immunizations and doing great preventative care. So I'm just going to say we put ourselves out of business, but all hospitals are struggling with this lower census in hospitals. And as facilities start to age and as they have to start spending money on infrastructure, it really becomes a question, is this something that we really want to invest in? And so it's been interesting in the Chicago community there that both University of Illinois and Mount Sinai have now come to the table and said, hey, listen, we don't really want to build a new PEDS unit, a new ICU unit. We're not really making money off this 55-bed NICU. How can we sit at the table? And we really are sitting at the table and starting to have the discussion. Now, the elephant in the room is the residency programs that two of the entities have. And so it's really about how do we now bring these cultures together and be able to create one program and be able to serve all of those children. So I think it's ideal time, and it's really sitting down and being honest with each other knowing what you have, what you do well, and what you're wanting to hold on and negotiating. I think that's
And you imagine that those conversations will take place during this process?
In the stakeholder engagement and interview, absolutely. I'll give you a short example, being mindful of time. My work in Maricopa, Maricopa is an academic hospital with a teaching staff affiliated with the University of Arizona. And as we were going through how to work together, the question came up, what should we not be doing in the medical group? And one of the answers was, does a 200-bed public hospital need pediatric hematology? And the answer was probably not, but it was there because of the teaching program, but 2 miles away was Arizona Children's Hospital. And there was clear conversations, not all of it easy to have, about the right place with the right set of beds and volume for a very important and compassionate service, but it's very difficult to support more than one pediatric hematology service within one city. So those conversations are not always easy, but they're important to have. In the time that we have, I thought I would want to focus on 2 areas of our deliverables, unless you have some specific ones you'd like us to discuss. The first being the stakeholder engagement, and the second being the delivery system, which at the end of the day is what touches our populations, our children, our families. And it's the delivery system that you eventually say that's what needs to work well. So I'm just going to skip ahead to stakeholder engagement. It's a two-way street. We want to learn what people and perceptions they have. We want to also guide recommendations based upon that engagement process. It's a collaborative process. We need the court, we need the JPS board, we need individuals that you assign to tell us whom you think are best to be interviewed, but we may have our own suggestions as well, and that we want to have individual and group interviews, public meetings, which is part of the proposal, and depending on your guidance, we would see that perhaps one or more of those public meetings should be in a language other than English, or to have a translation service available so that community members who don't have English as their primary language feel empowered to express what they believe. The integration of all of that will be on basically the 2nd to the 5th month. It's an extensive period of time. And we hope that that engagement process gets repeated in a cycle so that we can test what we're learning with one set of groups to come back to you and give you guidance about what we're learning from the interviewing process. We'll use structured questions, but open-ended questions. They certainly will be public meetings if they're large groups. But it's fairly important for us to hear all of the voices. And Linda, who has done a lot of stakeholder engagement in Texas, will be part of that. And perhaps, Linda, you would have some comments about how we can work best for us here.
Well, I think one of the most important things is that we understand your issues, and we're taking direction from the court on how we move forward. But your stakeholder process, I've done many of these in the past, and as Medicaid director as well as a consultant. But the stakeholder process is reaching out to a large group of people and inviting everyone to come in. It's inclusive, it's collaborative, and it's building partnerships. Because as we begin these conversations with the stakeholders is how we begin to build where we're going to be at the end of the day. So I think it's important that the clients that are served have a voice. It's important that your other healthcare providers in the community have a voice. And so our goal is going to be to reach out to all. And if someone is uncomfortable having a conversation with us in a public forum, we will make ourselves available for an off-site conversation. I fully expect that would happen. I know when I was meeting with Medicaid clients, it was not uncommon for them to say, I just want to talk to you. And so we will make ourselves available to do those sorts of things. But my 3 key words I use are inclusive, collaborative, and partnerships through this entire process.
And part of that process will include some special areas. Ray, for example, and the finance team will have some conversations and interview questions with the financial leadership of both JPS and other providers to talk about where do we think 10 years from now payment methodologies and uses of capital are likely to require decisions in the next several years here with the JPS strategic plan and project. And none of us have a clear understanding of where those reimbursements will go, but we know that they are quickly changing, not only in total amount, but in how those payments are changing the behavior of our doctors, of our nurses, of our behavioral health therapists, and how they do daily care to the people that you serve here in Tarrant County.
One of the things that I think, and we've alluded to it a couple of times, is the openness of this as far as open meetings. And we discussed it a little bit prior to y'all's in the previous presentation, would be that I can understand that there are instances where you're going to be conducting one-on-one interviews, and the individuals may say things, go to a little bit deeper depth as long as they feel like it's somewhat confidential. When you move into the group meetings or when you move into presentations, just as this meeting today is being streamed live, I hope that many of, if not all of those meetings will be public and open so that if someone cannot come because they're working in the middle of the day, but they want to hear and sense that, then I hope that those will all be there along with any materials, handouts. And I know that we've talked about setting up a site where people could go and ask questions, after they've had a chance to view that, and that there be some process by which we interact with them and hopefully provide them whatever answer we can at that point in time.
And one thing I can add to that, in the 1115 waiver process, each RFP, Regional Healthcare Partnership Anchor, has set up a website, and so all of our meetings that are public, that information is posted on that website and made available for those individuals.
And of course, JPS is the anchor in this region.
That's right.
So they would already have that set up.
That's
Exactly
correct.
so.
So that might be something we could build upon.
And be efficient in the use of resources, which is important. The delivery system work, which is not skipping the important part of finance, and also the fact that we expect, as I believe we had learned in the process, there may be another third party reviewing the facility project materials for JPS, and we would work to incorporate those preliminary findings on the capital project back into our work in the review of the entire county's needs. The delivery system market analysis, and there's 2 pages here, page 23 and 24. This gets back to, it's a focus respectfully not only about JPS, but about the county's providers, all of whom are directly or indirectly impacted by the care that you give to those who are in Medicaid, Medicare, they're uninsured, they're undocumented, they're charity care. Everyone is impacted one way or the other. And our team, led by Dr. Duncan, will be going through the market analysis nationally, regionally, here in Texas, in this county, comparing where JPS is going to where we see the market trends, and making some recommendations with regard to JPS and its abilities to do what it needs to do, but perhaps not try to do everything. No one provider can do that, which is back to the public-private partnerships that we discussed. Wrapping that all together in a report is going to be very crucial that all of these streams, environment, finance, delivery, and stakeholder engagements, are connected. We would expect to be giving you draft reports as they are developed, not 12 reports in month 5, and you have all of this material which you haven't seen. But we will be preparing those findings, draft those reports, taking them to this court, to the JPS board, and to the Blue Ribbon Committee, which I believe you are in the process of forming. We think it takes about 6 months to do the work. We look for your guidance. That's our experience in restructuring and market reviews that we've done for other clients. As Linda has indicated, we have an office in Austin. We will have a base of operations here. As I had let Mr. Manius know, our experience has often been that having our team in this building, for example, being available, or somewhere where there are other stakeholders present, makes it a much more effective process to establish a rapport between our team and your team. And that we're ready to start when you're ready to start. This kind of work that HMA does is what is most important to our mission, which is to improve the health care of the communities that we look at, that you look at, and to do it in a way that is patient-centered. Yes, insurance is important. Yes, finance is important. But at the end of the day, are we giving good quality care that everyone in this community of Tarrant County deserves to get, no matter who they are? And that's the mission of HMA over the last 31 years. So we appreciate this opportunity to kind of review this, answering any additional questions you may have to me or any of our team members.
You talk about stakeholders engagement. Can you speak to your process of public engagement, which I think is a critical part of this process because we are a publicly funded organization? What is our role in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years? We'll have to be supported by the public. So describe your process in public engagement to make sure that it is a legitimate one. It is giving the public truly a voice, not to create a sentiment of buying in, but really an honest and sincere desire to engage their inputs. What is your process in doing that?
I'll touch on that. I'm going to ask both Linda and Karen to weigh in as well. One of the very important elements of the stakeholder engagement is getting to individuals who don't think they're stakeholders, meaning the patients. We would hope that some of our public meetings and maybe even individual interviews are patients, patients of JPS, patients of the behavioral health services, talking to those who have experienced lack of access to care or who have enjoyed very good access to care. So listening to the voices of the people who actually receive care, in addition to those that finance it and organize it, is part of our engagement model. And we would want to be very robust in reaching out to the communities that you, the court, would identify, and maybe individuals who in the past have been not necessarily in agreement with the strategy. We certainly don't want to hear voices that are always in agreement with the JPS strategic plan or where the county has decided to go strategically. So we want to hear all voices. Linda, you have some viewpoints that you shared with me as well.
Yeah, I would say with the process, it's important that you be out in the community. I think having a public meeting in downtown Fort Worth is not going to meet the needs of the community. So I would see us having multiple stakeholder engagements around the county where it's convenient for the community members to attend the meeting. Warren mentioned it earlier. Want to make sure that we have appropriate translators if we have individuals that do not speak English, whether it's Spanish or Vietnamese or whatever the predominant language happens to be. We want to make sure that we've got that covered. And it's so the meetings are in the community, and basically what we're saying is, what do you need? And I'm going to go back to a story of when I was Medicaid director and I would meet with the Medicaid clients. When I would sit down and actually talk to them about what is your need, I hear something totally different than me just putting together policy to address something because I've either been directed to by the federal government or I've been directed to by the state government, whichever that would happen to be. And getting their input about this is my need and how best you can get there. And as all of us know, social issues have a lot of impact on your medical needs. So I would have providers talking to me about, well, the clients don't keep their appointments. Well, they don't keep their appointments because they don't have a car, and the bus only runs this time, or maybe there's not even a bus, or the child is sick and they have no one for daycare. So as you think about an integrated healthcare delivery system, we can't forget the social needs of that community in order for them to have better healthcare. So those are the things I think you hear in the process, and then it helps us then be able to develop maybe a broader scale than just, I need chiropractic, or I need vision, or I need whatever. It's really, how do you make the whole system come together?
Do you think a community survey is a valid tool?
I would, my personal opinion is it can be, but I'm not sure how much of the community would actually participate. It's certainly something that could be done. I'm not sure it gives you that much more. I think you get more when you can have a face-to-face conversation, because then you can kind of feel what that individual is saying rather than me checking a box. But yes, absolutely, it could be done if that would meet the need, or at least something that could be entertained.
Just one more question. You have not talked a lot about your experience involving behavioral health. Can you share with us some of your experience?
Absolutely. I'm going to ask Dr. Duncan to comment. I'll tell you, within our firm, we have 35 full-time staff who are clinical. Medical, nurse practitioners, behavioral health services, correctional health nurses. So we actually have team members who are engaged as we speak in a number of states, helping integrate behavioral health with primary care in federally qualified health centers, and teaching providers how to do that work better. One of the team members we have is Dr. Karen Bhatia, who is a recently practicing psychotherapist. She ran a federally qualified health center and is a licensed behavioral therapist. Karen, would you like to?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can add much more with it not being my specialty, but we have quite a bit of depth around behavioral health, and I would say most of the work that we now are receiving is around behavioral health. It's been an area that's been hugely neglected. I think the correctional systems, for the largest part, have driven a lot of the activity around behavioral health. How do we keep those individuals from being incarcerated that just have a mental health need? So how can we intercede? One of the things that we're doing at Cook County, we've just built a behavioral health center where the police actually bring those individuals who have been arrested, and there's treatment that's given there, and then it's decided what the next steps are. More interesting, many times we talk about this integration into primary care, and I think we really have to start looking at how do we integrate primary care into behavioral health homes. And so it, again, is this bi-directional. We have to be there where the patient needs are, but behavioral health is huge, from just medication to psychotherapy to something more extensive. So there's many different avenues around behavioral health, and so HMA has a huge depth around this and a lot of conversation about how best to do this. So,
I'll give you an example. We're currently in the San Mateo County Jail System with our leaders who are both correctional health and behavioral health, trying to help that county divert individuals from incarceration and into interim transitory psychiatric residential units, because the opioid addiction is driving arrests, and so the behavioral correctional connection is something that we're very much focused on right now. And that kind of work is certainly part of this engagement. We would hope to be talking to the behavioral health community, and also long-term care. I personally have a mother and a mother-in-law who have memory loss and are in assisted living facilities. And so a lot of our HMA work is also focused on long-term care. And as we look at the population of this county, how do we provide care to the 80 and 90 and 100-year-olds who may not have that pension fund to help them take care at home or be in one of the very nice assisted living facilities that have come up. How do we care for the medically indigent older population in those age groups? So part of our projection will be, well, what about long-term care? And how does that fit into the process of keeping individuals, like with the PACE program, out of a skilled nursing facility and at home, perhaps with a caregiver or with family members with support? And that's behavioral health too, geriatric behavioral health.
And the whole chronic, disease that we see, and individuals with multiple illnesses, with the diabetes, with the hypertension, and all of that are really around this whole population health. How do we look at this as a population to begin to treat them in the right place, the right care, in the right time? And that's really what it's about.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
The work that you did for Parkland, did you start from the very beginning in that process? I guess it was in 2004, all the way through the final delivery to the Blue Ribbon Committee?
Yes, there were two parts, and we went up to the Blue Ribbon Committee, and then we came back afterwards with some implementation support with some of the restructuring of healthcare services at Parkland. And so, yes, the answer is we were there at the beginning.
Other questions? Thank you all very much for your presentation and for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you for your interest and care for the people in Tarrant County.
You bet. Thank you. Again, I think if we could, I think maybe the next step is, and I know it's going to be 2 weeks, I didn't realize Commissioner Fickus had a meeting this afternoon that he was going to have to attend, but I think we need to come back on our first meeting back and maybe have a discussion and a little bit of just kind of what each one of us thought about the presentations and how we go from there, and then maybe at that point in time turn in our evaluation sheets and see where we go from there.
Sure.
Thank you all very much. Again, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Lynn, what's the max on theirs?
Thank you, Ms. Manias.
Cost.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me be sure. Let me ask you one other question if I can, and be sure that I noticed on your price sheet it was $655. That's drive it off the lot. That's the maximum guaranteed price, right?
That's correct, sir.
Everything?
That's it.
Okay. That's all I needed to know. I didn't want there to be
Yeah, we tell.
tax title or license added to
It has to
that.
be a firm fixed price, not to exceed.
Okay. Well, I felt pretty sure of that, but I wanted to.
We want to give you as much as we can.
Thank you.
You see Larry, tell him to go back to work.
I'll see him Thursday.
I don't believe at this time we have any further business, so at this point in time, put a foot in the room. Roy, put a foot in the room. We're now adjourned.